The Harris campaign seems to feel that they'd rather be them than the other guy. Mm-hmm. I observe that the Trump campaign seems to feel that the Harris campaign is right because they're acting in a few ways that don't seem like someone who thinks that they can tip it. Trump has pulled out of 4 interviews, major interviews, CNBC, 60 Minutes in the last few days. That's kind of striking and surprising for 20-some days to go to an election. But the other thing, that the big change that has happened since Harris came in, and this is an incredibly static race since she came in, right? All these people, oh, the polls are swinging. No, they're not. This is just stable. The big change is there's been a convergence in the swing states. When Biden was the candidate, he had a path through the Midwest, and that was it. What's happened since Harris is that Arizona, North Carolina, they've all kind of converged. And so you do have this odd prospect where what is objectively a very close race could become not that close in the Electoral College after Election Day, just because all the swing states correlate. And
so they correlate for whom?
That's what no one knows.
Okay. Right? Yeah. All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something there. Okay.
You bring up polling, and I wanted to ask you about this because it's something Paul and I have talked about off mic, and that is there are so many polls. We're getting so many of them. You look at them in complement. What do they tell you? How do you approach them? I know that there's so much skepticism about what they've said in the past, how they've been right and wrong. Here we have them at such a granular level. So much of what we know about these swing states comes from them, and we know kind of what issues are most important to voters. How much faith do you put into them, and how do you look at them kind of holistically?
Right. So the polling data in 2016 was actually pretty good. The estimate of the popular vote was only off by 1%. The polling data in 2020 was really bad. The estimate of the popular vote was off by 4%. What was bad in 2016 was the swing state polling, right, which is why the estimates as to who won were so off. But caveat to that, right now, the thing that makes me really question the polls right now is how consistent they are.
Interesting.
Just normal, right? Polling are statistical instruments. Normal statistical variation, you should see numbers that jump around all the time, right? If Harris is legitimately up 2%, let's say she actually is up 2%, you should expect to see a fair number of polls where Donald Trump is up 1%. Mm-hmm. We are not seeing that. We are just seeing poll after poll after poll coming in with roughly the same data over and over again. To me, that suggests that the polling companies are hurting. Nobody wants to
explain that. What does that mean when there's hurting in polls?
There's a lot of judgment involved in how you weight different populations, how you assess, right? Are you going to use recollections of how people voted 4 years ago? For example, a lot of polls will ask, how did you vote 4 years ago, and use that to assess, to reweight their sample. The problem is people don't actually remember that as well as you think. If you ask people a few years after the race, who did you vote for? On average, more than 60% will say they voted for the winning side.
You blocked it out.
This seems unlikely, yeah. So when you add in, there are enough subjective factors into polling that it just seems to me like the polling companies might be thinking that nobody wants to be embarrassingly wrong, and they're converging on a number which, look, it might be right, but it's not normal for it to be this tight.